Hey guys, this is L-Rae from Loom and Love, and today we're going to learn how to loom knit a hat. Now let's get started. These are the supplies you'll need to make a hat. Number 6 yarn. I like Bernat blanket. A loom. A pick. A needle. Scissors. Measuring tape. And stitch markers. Okay, let's put our stitch marker on the first peg of our loom. For a stitch marker, I like to use little colored hair elastics. If you don't have one of those, a piece of scrap yarn will do just fine. Now make sure you have your pick ready to go. We're going to make a slip knot now. So take the yarn, put it in the palm of your hand and pinch it down with your thumb. You're going to go around the back of your hand and make sure you cross it over the existing piece of yarn in your palm. Then you're going to go around the back of your hand again and take the yarn through that little space, and it's going to create a loop. That is your slip knot, and you're going to place it on your first peg. Slip it on there and pull both ends of the yarn to tighten. Nice and tight, but not too tight that it breaks the yarn. That's a key in looming. Tight, but not too tight. Now we're going to do an E-wrap cast on. How we do that is we take the yarn and we go around the back of each peg, and then on to the next and the next. And we're going to do that 2 times around the loom. Make sure you rotate the loom with you as you work. It makes it easier. And also another thing to know about looming is to make sure you hold the yarn close to the pegs with your fingers, because if not, you get some slack. And then it catches onto the other guys, and you don't want that. It makes it harder and more work. So make sure you hold your yarn nice and close. You have a lot more control that way. And we're going to keep going around and around. This is our E-wrap cast on going round and round. Now we're going to go around for our second time. Make sure you push the yarn down with your thumb to make it easier to pick off when we do our knit stitch. Just give it a little push each time as you come along to it. I find that the easiest way. And what we're doing is we're making 2 loops on our loom. Now we're on our last one, and we have to knit this one off. So what we do is we take our pick, and we're going to take the bottom loop and pull it over top of the top loop. Just like that. And that holds the yarn in place. I'll show you again. You're going to take the bottom loop and you're going to pull it over the top loop. Sorry, this is a hard angle to work from, but it's giving you the idea of the bottom loop going over the top. Oops. Bottom over the top. Now I'm going to bring it back around and do every single one. And that is called a knit stitch, bringing the bottom loop over top of the top loop. And there we go. That is our E-wrap cast on. Now the next step in making our hat is doing an alternation between a knit stitch and a purl stitch. Now we did a bunch of knit stitches in our E-wrap cast on. We're going to learn how to do a purl stitch next. First, we're going to do another knit stitch. And now you always know your stitch marker is always a knit stitch. This is where we're starting, is our stitch marker. So now we're going to knit, take the bottom loop, and pull it over top of the top loop. And now we're going to do a purl. Take your yarn and pull it down in front of your peg. Now take your pick and you're going to dig down inside of the top loop and you're going to try and scoop up that yarn you're holding down in front. And you're going to bring it up through. And that is going to create another loop. It's a little tricky. Up, here we go. Here's our loop. Now, the scary part. We take off the old loop and put on the new one. Tighten it. On to the next. Now we're going to do another knit stitch. Bottom loop over top of the top loop. And now we're going to do a purl, and I'm going to show you from a different angle. See how I'm holding the yarn in front? Now I'm going to take my pick and I'm going to dig in through the top loop and I'm going to scoop up that piece of yarn. Again, this is not an ideal angle for me to work at, so bear with me here. You're going to take that and you're going to try and get that piece of yarn and scoop it up. Almost got it. Try again. So you take your pick and use the grooves inside the pegs. There's the loop. Now, we have the new loop. We got to take the old loop off, put the new loop on, and tighten it. Now we're going to go to the next one, which is our knit stitch. And we're going to keep doing that. Knit, purl, knit, purl. I like to do this around the loom about 6 to 8 times, but you can do it as many times as you want. This is going to be the brim of our hat. I just finished the brim. Now it's time to make the body of the hat. I left off on a purl. So that means our next stitch is at our stitch marker. We always start off on the stitch marker. So what we need to do is we need to pull the yarn down on each peg to make it easier to do our E-wrap. Because what we're going to do is we're going to E-wrap and knit stitch and E-wrap and knit stitch the rest of our hat. So take your yarn and do your E-wrap and behind each peg. Now we're going to do this for quite a long time because we're going to make the body of the hat. Now I'm only going to show you one row because if I show you every single row, this would be a really, really long video. Okay, let's get ready to knit off our last one. And that will hold our yarn in place so we can knit off the other ones with ease. There's our loops. Now let's knit them off. Now we're going to repeat this process for quite a while. After knitting for quite a while at this point in the project, I like to fold up the brim so I can measure better. But first let's take a look. See all your knit stitches? Look how beautiful those are. Okay, let's fold up the brim. I find that gives you a better idea when you're measuring your hat. You want to measure it about 8 to 9 inches in length, give or take. Okay, back to our knitting. E-wrap and knit stitch, more and more. Okay, now stand up your hat and pull out your tape measure, and you want it to measure between 8 to 9 inches, depending on your head size. Now let's get ready to finish. Okay, now we're going to need our scissors and our needle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the yarn and we're going to wrap it around the loom 1.5 times, because we want extra slack before we cut the yarn. I know, we're going to cut it. That's scary, but it's exciting because it means we're almost done. So here's time number 1. Now a half a time. That should be plenty of slack for you. If you want, you can always cut more. Okay, now it's time to thread our needle. So take your yarn and your needle and stick the tail end of the yarn through your needle. And pull it quite a bit through. Now spin your loom around so you can see what you're doing. We're going to go into our first stitch marker. You're going to take your needle and you're going to go in through the top. Just be careful not to catch on those little hair elastics. That happens sometimes. Easy fix. Now pull the needle down and all the yarn with it. There we go, that's our first one. Now on to the next. Take your needle, pick it through the top, go down through, and pull all the yarn with it. And then tighten it up a little bit. Now we're going to keep doing this with every peg around the whole entire loom until we get to the last peg, which is the peg right before your stitch marker. Now I'm ready to do my last peg on the loom. The last peg is the one before the stitch marker. We're going to put our needle through the top and pull all the yarn through. And there we go. We are done that part with the darning needle. Now we need to pick off every piece of yarn and take it off of the loom. Another scary part, I know, but this is the end, guys. We're almost there. So pick it off, every single one, until you have no more left on the loom and your hat is free from the loom. Here we go, the last two. They pick off really easy as well. And as soon as we pick off this last one, we are free from the loom. Now it's time to take your string with your darning needle and start tightening your hat. Slowly, not too tight or you'll break the yarn. Be very careful. Make sure you leave an opening so you can stick your darning needle through and all your yarn, because you want to do your stitching on the inside of the hat, not on the outside. So flip your hat inside out, pull your yarn and your needle out, and finish tightening up your hat. Just be very careful. I've broken a few hats at this point and it is heartbreaking. Pull as hard as you can until you can't anymore. That's when you know there's no more to pull. Now it's time to stitch off the last little bit. Get your needle and put your finger through the little hole in the hat, just to see how much space you have. Not telling you to put your finger all the way through, but put your finger there just to see how much space you need to cover. And just do a couple basic stitches. So take your needle and stick it in one of the little tiny grooves there. You don't want to go too deep or you'll be able to see the stitching on the outside of the hat, and you don't want that. So try and get into a little guy that's just hanging there, not too deep. Perfect. And you're just going to pull it through just to cover up that hole, because we don't want a hole in the top of our hat. Do that a couple more times just to secure it. To be extra safe, I like to tie in a couple knots at the top just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Tie the knot as close as you can to your work so you don't have another loop sticking out where you don't want it. Just like that. And I like to do one more just to be safe. So just find a small little area. Again, you don't want to dig in deep so you'll see it on the outside of the hat. This is just the inside. So just a thin little piece of yarn will do. Pull it through and then you have a loop. Now before you pull the whole loop through, take your needle and stick it through that loop and pull. And pull it nice and tight and close to the hat. Okay, give it a little stretch because the yarn does bounce back in a little bit. Remember this for this next step because it's time to cut our yarn. Get your scissors ready. Pull your yarn nice and tight. And make sure when you cut it, you do not cut it too close. Give yourself a little bit of extra space for the yarn to bounce back in. Okay, now let's cut our tail end, the first piece of yarn we started with. So make sure you pull it nice and tight. Again, not too tight that you break the yarn, but tighten that up. Pull on it a bit, and let's give it a cut, but make sure you don't cut it too close. Give yourself a little bit of extra slack so it can bounce back in. Perfect, and there you go. There is our hat. Now let's check it out. Look at those details. I would absolutely love to see how your guys' turned out, so please leave a pic in the comments. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and stay tuned for more videos.